Hello, everyone. Just waiting for the live stream to start up, but welcome to week 5 of digital marketing. Got a couple of things I want to chat about with you today, but hopefully it'll go pretty smoothly. There we go. There's the live stream starting up. Let me turn off this mute. But anyways, so a couple things. First of all, most importantly, recap at the top of the hour. The group assignment is due, the project introduction is due on Thursday at midnight, as is the group contract. I've had a couple of questions about that, so I'll talk about that in more detail later on. The individual assignment will also be coming out probably Thursday morning, if I think I'm going to be able to wrap it up by tomorrow night and get it posted in time. Otherwise, at the latest, it'll come out by the time my offline class starts, which is at 1:30 in the afternoon. So those are the two big announcements coming up. The other thing is, since those announcements are there is no top hat assignment for the week. So feel free to just keep contributing to the ones that have already come around. Nothing else going on with respect to that. We are starting the analytics videos, so make sure and watch those videos. And of course, catch up on last week's office hours if you haven't already. Otherwise, kind of go ahead and look at this week's, right? So if any of you are watching from the live stream, then feel free to shoot me a question on the live chat. Remember again that there is a little bit of a delay, so don't wait until the last minute to do it. I recommend typing in the questions now. I'll get to it at the end of the portion where I kind of talk about all those things. Okay. So let me bring up real quick just exactly all my notes about what we're talking about today. What's going on? My computer has frozen a little bit. I'm sorry. Everybody, trying to get it back. This could be bad. It doesn't seem to want to unfreeze right now. Lovely. I think I'm streaming okay, but it's just not letting me do anything else at this point. Maybe sometimes taking out the power, putting it back in. Okay, you may see me again in a few minutes because it looks like I may have frozen my computer completely. Oh, that's what the problem is. Emptying the trash. What the heck? Oh. Okay, well I can click through things still. Hopefully this will work. Okay, let's try and keep going. It's kind of weird. Okay. No, maybe not. I'm sorry, maybe not. Certain things. I see what the problem is. Okay, hold on. I think I can fix this. Maybe. No, it's not letting me get to what I need. Oh. Okay. That's weird. Okay, here we go. I think I see what the problem is. I will hopefully get this all back together shortly. No, that wasn't the problem. Will that do it? Nope, that's not doing it. Its reveal is locked. Okay, I'm gonna try something. That didn't do it. Okay. It looks like I have no option but to restart. I will talk to you again in just a little bit. Actually, maybe. Can I just do this? Yeah, okay. I think I'm gonna have to restart. Oh, no, hold on. It's working again in a weird way. Okay. Riveting. I know. I apologize for this. Okay, everybody, I think we're back online. Sorry about all that. I somehow got into a position where my whole computer was just locked up. Like I could see I was still streaming, but I couldn't do anything about it. So let's start again. Okay, so reminder at the top of the hour that this week you have to your group assignments, right, which includes both the project introduction and the team contract. In addition to that, you also have to your individual assignment will come out on that day. As I mentioned, it'll probably come out early that morning, but it may not come out until a little bit before 1:30 that afternoon, because that's when my other appointment is. So those are the big things to briefly mention. Then additional details, we'll be talking about analytics. So watch the analytics videos, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that today. There is no top hat for the week, but hopefully you've contributed to the previous week's top hat about the follower factory. So hopefully that went okay. And yeah, and I think that's about it. You know, and as always, if you want to read the material in the textbook, I listed the relevant chapters on the notes. Okay, so let's start with where everyone's asking, which is the group assignment. And there have been a couple of questions that have come in over email about the group assignment. A lot of them having to do with what parts of the project introduction are actually due for on Thursday, right? And essentially there's like parts 1 through 4, which is the title page, table of contents, executive summary, and the project introduction. All I really need from you is the project introduction, which is the part 4, right? Which talks about introducing the company, explaining their business model, and explaining why they need digital marketing, right? That's all I absolutely need from you. If you want to do the other parts 1 through 3, that is fine determined, but they are not strictly required at this time, right? I find it weird to ask you to write an executive summary before you've written the rest of the project, right? So that's the first question I want to make sure I clarify, because a lot of people have asked, do we have to turn in the table of contents and all that, right? And the answer is no, you don't have to. You know, feel free to start that document and get it ready to go and turn in as much as you want. And if there is something there, I will react to it. But, you know, there's no need to turn it in at this point, okay? The individual assignment. The individual assignment is coming out Thursday morning, just to briefly re-describe, right? This is the assignment on what we call the conceptual assignment, right? So in this case, you'll be reading a small description of a company or or maybe a concept related to digital marketing, and then you'll be asked 5 questions about that concept or company, and you'll be asked to write about a half-page answer to each one. Small note, I run through this every time. I'm not looking for the first half page you come up with, right? Like if you write down like 10 sentences and you haven't even answered the question yet, you're not going to get full credit, right? Like that's not the way it works. I want 10 sentences that are the best answer to the question, right? Not just the first 10 sentences that start to answer the question, right? So make sure you take that into account. I want your best answer, not your first answer, okay? So with that being said, let's talk about the follower factory reading, right? And by the way, if you're watching online, please post any questions you have, and I apologize again that for the hiccups in streaming. So let me see. Let me pull up the follower factory stuff. So the follower factory, I thought this was a really interesting piece, and if you have a chance, rather than just reading the PDF, I highly recommend you take a look at the actual New York Times article because it has some nice interactive graphics that go along with it, right? Okay. And by the way, I did want to mention one other thing, because of the way YouTube works and the fact that if I show it up here, I'll get in trouble for Netflix violations and stuff like that. There are 2 videos that came out recently on the topic of influencers that are really interesting. So they're one is a documentary on Netflix and one's a documentary on Hulu. They're both about the Fyre Festival. So I highly recommend taking a look if you get a chance. The one on Netflix is called Fyre, the best party that never happened. The one on Hulu is called Fyre Fraud. Just so you know, going into it, there's 2 different groups. Like the Hulu one is kind of like an outside group that put it together, whereas the one on Netflix was actually put together by this company called F. Jerry Media that actually was part of the project, right? So the one in the Hulu case, they actually kind of mention how the media company may have contributed somewhat to what was going on, whereas the Netflix one kind of paints them in a rosy light. It's actually not as, it's not saying that they're perfect, right? It's just saying they're a little bit better. Anyways, there's a clip towards the end, about an hour and 15 minutes or so into the Netflix one, where they talk about the responsibility of influencers. And so for those of you who don't know, briefly, the Fyre Festival was this big music festival that was supposed to happen in the Bahamas, organized by Ja Rule and a couple of other individuals, including this guy, we're blanking on his last name, but Billy, his first name, who organized a company before called Magnesis, right? And the festival was supposed to be awesome. It was really expensive to get there. People were promised like vacation villas for tens of thousands of dollars, and there was nothing there, and they were served like cheese sandwiches, and it was awful. Anyways, long story short, part of the reason why I took off is because they held this like promotional weekend where a bunch of models and a bunch of celebrities were there, and they filmed it and they released this video that got promoted by those same people, right? There's parts in the middle of this video that talk about what is the liability of an influencer and what is the responsibility of an influencer to make sure that the people the product they're promoting is a good product, right? And can they be sued, right? And I think it's an interesting discussion. Billy McFarland, someone just pointed out the name. Sorry I blanked on his last name. But it's an interesting discussion, right? Like, is an influencer responsible for what the product that they're pushing, right? And technically, they're all supposed to put hashtag ad or advertising in any post they have that is paid for, right? Where they're getting some compensation for it. But a lot of them didn't, right? And so that's a separate concern. But even if they do, right, like what's their responsibility, right? And so I highly recommend watching the Netflix documentary. I specifically like the last half hour or so that talks like, what is the responsibility of these different people into what's going on. But anyways, it reminded me of this week's reading. I actually, in my class, I can show the little clip here. Facebook or YouTube will take down the video if I put up the little clip on it, so I don't want to do that. But I highly recommend you go and try and watch it and take a look at it. So let's talk about Follower Factory, right? The kind of assignment we had. Okay, so let's see. Let's pull up the slides I put together. Okay. So here we go. Just trying to find it. There it is. Okay. So So, one question I think that's very interesting to ask in this space is how aware is the public, right? And, a lot of the responses I got from you and I think is true is that people still aren't very aware of what is going on with influence, right? And how much influence affects. Let me blow this up just a little more, right? So for instance, I went on Fiverr.com, which is kind of a popular website. And this screenshot's from last year, where you can pay people just by anything. You can get people to do anything for $5, right? And I wanted to make it clear that, like, it's not like the follower factory notion has gone away. It's not like somehow we discovered it and then all of a sudden it's not there. This is people who are advertising on Fiverr.com that they will post your product or your service to their 12,000 Facebook followers, 20,000 Twitter followers, whatever you want, right? So this one's Instagram, Facebook, right? If the top right one there is for $30, I'll promote you to my 100,000 Facebook followers. The middle one in the up column, that seems to be cheapest. I will post your product or service to my 12,000 Facebook followers. There's one, I will share your website or recipe on Facebook to 5,000 people for $5, right? So the point I want to make is that nothing has really changed, right? Like and I'm sure if we went to Facebook, right, or went to Fiverr right now, right, we could still find some of these same kind of things, right? So I'll pull it up live here since I don't have to worry about it. And yep, here you go. So this is the page from about a year ago. I'll show you the page from right this instant live, right? Let's pull up the device. So here you go. Okay. So blow it up a little bit, right? As you can see, so I will promote you on my Facebook fan page with 940,000 followers. I will set up. I will share your blog post with 2 million Facebook followers. I will share your post. If anything, I think the price have gone down since last year, right? So now's a good time to buy. But my point is, right, that clearly, even though we're aware of this, and even though influence is coming in, it still seems to be it's a select group that are aware of that, right? That a lot of people still seem to think that their feeds, their Facebook feeds, their Twitter feeds, their Instagram feeds, are completely innocent, that no one can control them, right? But the truth of the matter is that that's generally not the case, right? So. So how does the number of followers, so one thing that's an aspect here, right, is the quality of followers, but also the number of followers, right? And, maybe it's true that the number of followers just doesn't matter that much, right? That it's really more has to do with the quality of the followers. But I think that's kind of a little bit potentially too much, right? That's giving people too much credit. That's the phrase I want to use, right? Pure numbers often make decisions, right? It's been shown in the past that the more followers, the more likely that one will make a purchase decision. So if someone tweets something out, right, and they have a lot of followers, it's more likely to follow. And as a result, advertisers are going to pay more for influencers with more followers. But if those followers are actually fake, right, then it doesn't help. Like that doesn't work, right? Like it doesn't. You're not going to get any leverage as a company from paying someone who has a lot of fake followers to actually promote your product, right? So you need people who actually have real, honest to goodness follower capabilities, right? Like that their people are actually real, right? So it is definitely important that you have real people. But it has an effect on sales, right? One thing is, it might be true that as people become a little more aware of this, if certain followers are known to have fake followers. Certain influencers are known to have fake followers. Maybe that will affect the decisions at times, right? But in many cases, it doesn't affect the decisions very much. Okay. So one big concern, obviously, is that marketers are paying for followers that are not legitimate. So if I'm a marketer and I'm reaching out to an influencer, and that influencer, it turns out, has a bunch of fake followers, then I don't really want to pay them, right? Another concern is that the influential's fake followers are discovered that could tarnish a brand reputation, right? So if I have a bunch of influencers that I'm working with, right, and who say I'm still getting enough impact out of them, so I keep working with them even though they have a bunch of fake followers. If it turns out that that influencer, it becomes known that they have fake followers, then that could potentially be a concern, right? So that's definitely a problem there. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. And so that's definitely an issue that might happen. So marketers should be worried about partnering with influencers, right? Because there might be something that could happen as a ramification of that. Of course, then there's the question: should accounts be verified, right? And this is a great picture. I love this. This isn't actually from the article. I think this is from another article I was reading. But this is like, you know what? Probably, I don't know how many there's in that picture, but maybe 100 iPhones in that picture, right? Set up so that people can log in and from a whole bunch of different accounts simultaneously, and you can have one person liking something from 100 different accounts, right? And it's kind of funny to me because I feel like there's a bunch of ways you could do this automatically on one computer, but in reality, you know, to get around all the things that Facebook and Twitter have put in place to try and prevent you from doing it all on one computer, they found it easier just to hang 100 iPhones from a board and kind of push them on there. And so this becomes a question: should we verify accounts, right? The positive idea is that everyone is now accountable and that fake accounts become a lot harder to do, right? Like if we're requiring you to send in, say, a driver's license or a passport or something like that, it becomes much harder to create fake accounts, right? Honestly, I feel like we're going to have to move towards this direction to a large extent, right? I mean, with the amount of just, like, there's got to be some solution there, right? And, I mean, the downside that I don't like about it is that it destroys the ability of speech without repercussions, right? So, right now, if I can go on Reddit, create a throwaway account, and post on the NC State Reddit thread a legitimate complaint I have about NC State without worrying about repercussions from my supervisors or anything like that, right? If you're required to have a verified account, I no longer have that avenue, right? So maybe that's not a big deal, right? But it's potentially an impact that might come out of it, right? So I think it's important to think about, right? I think it's important to think about it from the point of view of marketers, right? So marketers now know that the person they're working with is verified, right? That they have that. But, downside, marketers have been taking advantage of fake follower numbers, right? So they lose that capability, right? Influentials, it now requires them to go through the verification process. So that's a little bit more onerous. But on the upside, if they're doing it well, right, then it doesn't really matter, and they'll win out, right? They'll have less competition if they've always had a good number of followers, since they won't have to compete against a bunch of influentials who have a bunch of fake followers, right? Consumers, seems like a win for the consumers. Like, I don't see any cons to this, right? They would now know that influential that they're dealing with is in fact has a true number of followers. Okay, so it seems like that should work out in all cases. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to say about the verified accounts and some of the aspects as we're going forward with that. Okay, so let's go through for the questions. If there's any questions, please submit them on YouTube. I got a couple from email that I want to talk through, but other than that, that's about it. Okay. And Ayush mentions that the video is kind of blurry. Often, Ayush, that actually has to do with your connection to the internet and how fast my stream is working. If you go back and watch it later, it's usually a little bit more crisp and clear. But let me turn off this account real quick because this will help out. Yes, there we go. Okay. Okay. So, I did have a couple of questions come in on email I want to talk about, right? One of them was to do with the fact that, and this is from Peter, and Peter actually stopped me. He happened to see me walking around Nelson Hall. I do exist in real life, not just on a video being teleported into your mobile device. And he asked me this question: how do you logistically execute the strategy that I actually talked about? What are the differences between a small business and a large corporation? For a small business, how many hours per week should the company invest into its digital marketing strategy? Understanding there is no right answer. I'd be interested in hearing your perspective. So this is a great question, right? So and we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail as we continue to expand, right? But let's take the social media strategy that we just talked about, for instance. How do you actually logistically do that? Well, first of all, you have to spend some time planning, right? Like, that's the most important thing. You need to sit down with the kind of steps and think through how you're best going to implement it. And one thing I'm going to emphasize throughout this class is that implementation and control is at least as important as strategy and planning, right? So understanding who is actually going to implement the strategy is very important, right? And so you need to think about that to a large extent. Differences between big companies and small companies. Well, most of the strategies that I'm giving, most of the checklists. So you'll see, I do a live checklist. I'll do first do this, then this. Do your research, look at the tactics, right? Try and develop smart goals, right? These are meant to be hierarchical in nature, right? Which means that you can write one strategy for your company at the highest level. Like, what is our digital marketing strategy, right? And in fact, above that is what is our marketing strategy, but that's beyond the scope of this class, right? And as part of that, you can then create the digital marketing. So part of your overall marketing strategy may very well be, we need to develop a digital marketing strategy. So then you develop the digital marketing strategy. And part of the digital marketing strategy might be, we need to develop a Facebook strategy, right? A strategy to reach out on Facebook. So as part of your Facebook strategy, part of that might be, we need to develop this kinds of content and meet these kind of marketing goals, right? So what I'm trying to get at here is that in a small corporation, a small business, right, all of that might be one person, right? And in fact, it might not even be what we call an FTE, a full-time employee, right? It might be, or full-time equivalent, it might be part of a full-time, right? It might be that the manager spends 10% of their time on this project, on their digital marketing on a weekly basis, right? And so when you scale up, all you're doing is you're dividing out who's making those decisions among a larger group of individuals, right? So in the case where it's a small business, right, it's one person who's designing the digital strategy and designing the offline strategy and designing the social media strategy. And those other things, it might be groups of individuals who have to then integrate all that stuff in together, right? So that's logistically how you handle the strategy planning. Now, as we go forward, we'll talk about implementation and control. You want to make sure you have things like good governance in there. So once you've decided what the strategy is and once you've decided the content you're going to be creating and all those kind of things, right, you still need to think about who is actually going to be implementing these projects, right? Who is actually going to be in charge of creating new content, right? Who is going to be in charge of scheduling the content, getting out, right? Who's going to be maybe some of this, who's going to be in charge of content for Instagram versus Facebook versus Twitter, right? So all those things have to kind of be arranged. And then the final question Peter asks is how long should they spend? That's a tough one to answer, right? So I think the first thing any company should do is kind of prioritize research and customer service, right? So make sure you're monitoring your brand name on a regular basis, right? Make sure you're reaching out via customer service. If someone complains to you on Twitter, if someone complains about you on Facebook, responding to it, that should be the top priority. And the nice thing about that priority is it scales, right? So if I set aside, let's say at 5 p.m. every day, I'm going to look to see what complaints we have. If we have a lot, or maybe compliments, right? If we have a lot of compliments or a lot of complaints, it's going to take me a while to do that. And that probably means that my business scaled up quite a bit. If there aren't many, then it's not going to take me a long time, right? I think the question that Peter's really asking is, with regards to content creation and development of new social media content, how much should you spend on that? And again, it's a little bit of it depends, right? But, you know, I try and give you some strategies. I would pick a small number of social media platforms, and I would concentrate on them first. And I would try and create a minimal amount of content that's needed to show that you have an active account, right? So on Twitter, that kind of means about tweeting once a day. So however long it takes you to create 7 tweets, that's fine. On Instagram, you can kind of get away with actually even posting like once every couple of days. So, you know, if however long it takes you to create 3 Instagram posts, plus respond to all the comments and interactions, right? That's the other aspect. Not only do I create new content, I have to go back and respond and interact with people who created on the older content that I created. So again, I don't think that's going to be a specific answer, but for the smallest of small businesses, I think spending at least an hour a week is probably good, right? For large businesses, they're going to have multiple FTEs employed, right, on that same project. So it's really up to the business to a large extent. And I hate to punt on it, but that's kind of the best I think I'm going to be able to do. So the final question I had, some people, I just released the analytics work, but some people have already dived into it. And so I had a question about the slide duration, the test duration slides. All right, so I'm going to pull that up real quick. What's that? Oh, that's weird. Shouldn't be doing that. Okay, let me do it a different way. Okay. Just pulling up. So I'm going to pull up that slide deck real quick just so you can see it. Okay, just blowing it up a little bit. So this is the slide that I think she said it actually terrified her. No, it's the one before. So, or before that actually. So let me talk through these slides a couple of times. So basically what these slides are for is determining the length of how long you need to run an A/B test. And before I go into the details of the calculations, I want you to get the intuition. The intuition is given two distributions. So one way to think of it is that what's one way to do an A/B test? One way to do an A/B test is I run my A/B test. I see how many people go to site A. I see how many people go to site B. Whoever has the higher conversions, I just say that's the better one. The problem with that is that a lot of these processes are fairly stochastic. Like, it might be that day somebody, a group of people just happened to be assigned to site A that we're looking to convert, right? So we need to develop a minimum threshold by which we can make some confident decision that one of those websites is better than the other, right? And how is that we're going to measure that? Well, we're going to measure that by seeing to make sure that the number of people who have shown up is greater than a certain number, so that we know that we have enough information, about those distributions that we can tell they're separate. That's basically the question. So, for instance, in scenario 1, given 2 variants, so an A and a B, right? And we're going to say that the estimated current conversion rate, which is the past conversion rate, is 30%. And we have to specify a relative minimum improvement. How much do we want the new solution to beat the old solution, right? And in this case, we're going to say 20%, right? Now, relative improvement means that it's a relative improvement over the estimated current conversion rate. So currently it's at 30%. 20% of 30% is 6. So we need to beat, we're looking to beat a 36% conversion rate, essentially, right? A lot of people screw this up. They think relative is the same as absolute minimum improvement. So an absolute minimum improvement would be to add those two numbers, 30 plus 20, right, and get 50. But instead we're doing 30 times 1.2, right? And that's where we get the 36. So then once we know those, we plug all those numbers into a calculator, and it tells us how many samples we need to see, how many people we need to see per variation. In this case, it's 962, right? If our average traffic is 200, meaning that we're sending 100 people to each variation on average, because it's half of that, then the expected length of duration is about 9 days. Now in scenario 2, all we've done is we've increased what we consider to be the minimal amount we want to see the new one improve by, right, to 40%. And that actually takes less time. And this is what I want to talk about today a little bit. So why does that take less time? Well, one way to think of it is that the baseline case is the red line in this chart, right? And the alternative is the blue line. And what we're trying to determine is, are they different? Are they created by different processes, right? If they are, then that means we've got the improvement we need, right? And so these tests that we're developing are just there to kind of figure out, is this different? Now, interestingly enough, if we're looking for a bigger relative improvement, let's say, you know, here it's like the relative improvement is that, sorry, the improvement one is estimated at like 0.01, right? What if we did, what if we were looking for a bigger gap than that, bigger than 0 to 0.01, right? Would it take more or less time to make sure that they were significantly different? And the answer is it would actually take less, right? Because right now the blue and the red lines overlap quite a bit. If we move it farther to the right, they're not going to overlap as much, which means it's easier to tell whether a process we're drawing from looks more like the blue or more like the red. So there's these other two numbers, alpha and beta. You don't need to worry too much about them. We kind of just set them to 0.05 and 0.2, but you know, I do want to mention them. And then you have this formula. So the first half of this formula is T alpha over 2 plus T beta squared. That's going to remain constant for like everything you do, because we're going to set T over alpha divided by 2 to 1.96. We're going to set beta to 0.84. Right? Now P1 is our baseline conversion rate, our 30%. And P2 is the new conversion rate in absolute terms. So in this case, it's 6% greater than the previous one. So it's 30% and 36. And then D is just subtracting P2 from P1. So this graph, the whole point of this graph is just to show my math a little bit, right? So it's just saying that, you know, that T alpha over 2 plus T beta is 1.96 plus 0.84 squared. P times 1 minus P is the same as 0.3 times 1 minus 0.03, sorry, 0.3. And then P2 is the term is 0.36 times 1.036, and that's all divided by the distance between them. And in this case, it's 36 divided by 30. 36 divide, sorry, oh my gosh. 0.36 minus 0.3, which is 0.06. Wow, I had a hard time saying that for some reason. So that's the basic rule, and then once you do that, now you do all that math, and you get 962 as the sample size for variation. If the traffic is about 100 a day per variation, right, then it's going to take about 9.5 days for the experiment to complete. There is some R code, right? So if you want, you can just plug this in R. And there are a bunch of calculators, online calculators out there, like the VWO calculator. I think I show one in the next slide, right? Yeah, so it's the VWO calculator that will do these calculations for me. I should note that, you know, depending exactly how you have your alpha set and your beta set and some other things, it may take more or less time for these tests to run, right? Exactly. But eventually they might give you slightly different numbers. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? So one of the website calculators might give you slightly different numbers than another one because they set these alphas and betas slightly different. As long as you tell me, like on any of the tests, as long as you tell me where you got the numbers from and how they affected what you're looking at, right? Then that's all I need, right? So that's the important aspect of what you're doing there, okay? So just make sure you tell me how you did your work, and that's all I ask you to do. The VWO one tends to use the same alpha and betas. The alpha and betas that I use in my slides are kind of the industry standards, but you do occasionally see people messing around with different significance levels. If you ever heard this result is statistically significant or not statistically significant. Usually what that means is an alpha of 0.05, which is what we're using right now, right? So hopefully that helps clear this stuff up a little bit. I hope it doesn't make it more confusing. If you have any specific questions, feel free to shoot them to me about this. I'm going to pull up real quick. I think I want to make sure that I covered everything. She talks about taking a slower walkthrough, so hopefully that helps, right? Improvement versus relative. So two more important things to just cover. Remember, improvement versus relative improvement. So if you go back to this slide, you'll see improvement versus relative improvement pretty easily. So the base conversion rate is 30% or 0.3, right? Relative improvement is 20% or 0.2. So final improvement is going to be 30%, 0.3 times 1.2, which is going to be 0.36. So the absolute improvement is 6 percentage points, right? But the relative improvement is 20% because it's 20% more than 30%. So that's kind of the crisp and clear definition of that. The one other aspect that she says is, where does the T of alpha divided by 0.2 is 1.96 and T of beta of 0.84? Quite frankly, these are just lookup charts. These are lookup charts that you can go to. Let me see if I can find one online real quick to see if I can show it. Okay. So I think I've got one. Let me just pull it up. See if I can show it to you. These are sometimes called your T tables. You might have heard it. Trying to pull it up. Taking a little while to load. So in this case, they're actually quote unquote z-scores, right? The same thing, because of the fact that we're assuming that you have a large number of degrees of freedom. In reality, that could affect what we're doing, but in many cases it doesn't. So let me see. Okay. So here is one of these kind of. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to move that around. Here's one of these kind of charts, and you'll notice right down here, right, for Z of 95% or an alpha of 0.05, which you can see the alpha value up here, 0.05, right? We get a 1.96 value, right, which is the same as the value that we're using in our charts. And then the 0.84 actually comes from this, from the beta level, the T of the beta level, and that is, why am I not slide? Why is this not sliding? So this is T of 0.8, right? You'll see up here, right, which is also a power of 0.2, right? And you'll look down here, and it's just 0.84, right? And so this is where we get it from. It's from the student's t-test, right, and the t-tables associated from that. So that's where the 0.84 and the 1.96 numbers come from, right? And so she wanted to see, and so just to show, I can actually pull up the tool that I mentioned, the VWO tool. No, I did not want. That was not the right one. I don't want that. I want this. Okay. So if you go to VWO.com and you go to resources, well, I don't know why it's sometimes streaming takes a lot of effort. So resources, you go resources. Go on, give me a split second here. Resources. Oh, I don't know why it won't let me click on it. There we go. A/B testing significance calculator. Right, here's the exact. Oh, not that one. Sorry, the duration test is what I want. A/B testing duration calculator. Right, so here I can put in exactly the same numbers. 30% baseline case, 20% relative improvement. Number of variations is only 2. Average number of daily visitors. Average number of daily visitors 200. Percent of visitors in the test is 100. I calculate the test duration in 9 days. Okay. Oh, you didn't see the bottom part. Let me scroll that up a little for you. There you go. So hopefully that answers some questions. I know that that's been a little confusing. Hopefully, if you have any questions, go back and watch the videos. If you still have questions, shoot me an email. I can address them in later ones. You won't be asked any questions about this kind of thing in the individual assignment that's coming out on Thursday, because that's a conceptual assignment. But I should mention that it is quite common that I ask these kinds of questions during the don't want to. We're doing the picture-in-picture thing. That I don't want to. That you don't want to. That you do want to look at this kind of thing for the second individual assignment, because that second individual assignment is going to speak a lot about the actual numbers, the actual analytics numbers, right? Not just the concept. So I highly recommend kind of looking at it for that. Okay. Well, I hope that's helped everyone. That's it for me today. Just remember, turn in your group assignment on Thursday, and look forward to getting your conceptual assignment on Thursday as well. Take care, everyone. And if you have any questions, shoot them to me on email. Take care.